On 20 June 1960, the country of Mali was officially independent from France. But the Mali we see on the map today is quite different from the Mali that seized its independence that June. The country was known at the time as the Mali Federation and consisted of what is now the Republic of Mali and the Republic of Senegal. It was governed by its premier, none other than the Pan-African socialist leader Modibo Keïta. For an English-speaking audience, Modibo Keïta is perhaps the most important, yet least well-known revolutionary Pan-Africanist to leave a mark on Africa's history post-independence. Yet he is hailed in Mali not just as the father of independence, but as a valiant anti-colonial leader and staunch proponent of African unity.
Modibo accuse un retard formidable, terrible, au point de vue reconnaissance qu'on lui doit par rapport à ses vertus, à la noblesse de son comportement pour l'Afrique, le devenir de l'Afrique, en se basant sur nos us et coutumes de chez nous, les valeurs ancestrales.
Keita was born in a country that was then known as French Sudan, a landlocked French colony at the time of his birth in 1915. At an early age, Keita demonstrated outstanding abilities within the formal education system, coming first place in the entrance exam to the famous William Ponty School in Senegal, which trained the intellectual class within France's West African colonies. 3 years later, Modibo Keïta graduated top of his class in 1936. His professors wrote about his character, describing him as
an elite teacher, very intelligent but anti-French, a high-class agitator to watch closely.
Keita had an early exposure to revolutionary politics, joining the Marxist-Leninist communist study groups which operated across French colonial Africa under the direction of the French Communist Party. From 18 to 21 October 1946, a meeting was held in Bamako to give birth to the Rassemblement Démocratique Africain, RDA, aka the African Democratic Assembly, the most influential anti-colonial organization in Francophone Africa. The RDA created sections in Mauritania, Côte d'Ivoire, Burkina Faso, Guinea, Senegal, Togo, Benin, Niger, Cameroon, Congo-Brazzaville, Gabon, Chad, and of course, Mali. With the creation of the RDA, Modibo Keïta's initial political party, the Sudanese Bloc Democratic Party, merged with a couple others to create the Sudanese Bloc of the RDA, also known as the US RDA. Mali at the time was still known as French Sudan. The RDA was initially focused on anti-colonialism and African unity. However, it was a broad organization with various ideological divergences. A pro-Western neo-colonial faction was led by Félix Houphouët-Boigny of Côte d'Ivoire. Another faction was led by revolutionary Pan-Africanists. Modibo Keïta was a consistent militant for the cause of African unity within the organization.
C'était les assises fondamentales de la pensée et de l'œuvre de Modibo. C'était le combat pour la souveraineté nationale et contre la balkanisation de l'Afrique.
In 1958, Charles de Gaulle held a referendum across the French colonies of West and Central Africa, during which he had the colonies vote on whether or not they wanted total independence from France, or if they wanted to remain part of the so-called French community. This was the famous referendum during which Ahmed Sékou Touré, who would become the president of Guinea, proudly proclaimed,
Nous disons de façon publique que nous préférons la liberté dans la pauvreté à l'opulence dans l'esclavage.
However, in the years leading up to the big referendum, France was maneuvering to divide its West and Central African colonies.
Quand ils ont créé deux grandes fédérations, la France, en Afrique centrale et en Afrique occidentale, Fédération de l'Afrique occidentale française et Fédération de l'Afrique équatoriale française. Mais quand ils ont vu qu'ils ne peuvent rien contre le vent de l'indépendance qui soufflait, ils ont dit, bon, maintenant, il faut qu'on les sépare. Parce que diviser pour régner. C'est comme ça qu'ils ont adopté, en 1956, la loi cadre. Donc, quand Modibo a vu avec la loi cadre qu'ils ont territorialisé les colonies, c'est-à-dire qu'on ne reste plus dans l'Afrique occidentale, fédération, mais chaque colonie devient un territoire à part. Modibo a vu tout de suite que c'était un danger.
Modibo Keïta justified his vote in favor of joining the so-called French community with the following words.
On the eve of the referendum, the majority of African states had decided to vote yes. It was on the basis of all these elements that the US RDA advocated a yes vote to facilitate the achievement of unity. Our aim was to lay the foundations for federal African states and to join forces with our African brothers to move towards total independence for this federation and, consequently, for our country. That's why we voted yes.
Bon, moi je veux, comme nous sommes en train d'aller vers l'indépendance, moi je veux qu'on adopte une position commune, qu'on vote tous oui ou qu'on vote tous non, pour que par la suite, on négocie l'indépendance avec la France dans le cadre d'un État fédéral. On ne peut pas renverser la tendance, parce que son objectif, ce n'était pas l'indépendance de façon isolée, mais l'indépendance dans le cadre d'un État fédéral. Donc c'est pourquoi on a voté oui.
Much like his close comrade and friend Kwame Nkrumah, Modibo Keïta was a staunch Pan-Africanist who attempted to unify Mali with other African states on multiple occasions in order to kickstart the creation of a United States of Africa. In Keïta's own words,
Mali will not be able to consider its mission accomplished as long as greedy colonialists occupy a single inch of African soil.
Very early on, Keïta proved his seriousness by leading the way in the creation of the first independent African federation, the Mali Federation. On December 29th and 30th, 1958, he organized the Bamako Conference, during which he invited representatives from RDA sections whom he believed to be the most open to the idea of forming a Pan-African federation. These included leaders from Senegal, Dahomey, now Benin, and Upper Volta, now Burkina Faso. The goal of the meeting was to form the Mali Federation, a federal Pan-African state. Succumbing to pressure from France and more neo-colonial elements within the RDA, most infamously Félix Houphouët-Boigny of Côte d'Ivoire, Mauritania, Dahomey, and Upper Volta pulled out of the federation. However, Mali and Senegal pressed forward, forming the first Pan-African federation on the continent. Léopold Sédar Senghor of Senegal served as president of the Assembly, and Modibo Keïta served as president of the council and head of the federal government. However, the Mali Federation was short-lived, lasting only 2 months, as the political differences between Modibo Keïta and Léopold Sédar Senghor were stark. While Senghor advocated for close relations with former colonizer France, Modibo Keïta was insistent upon rejecting French domination and neo-colonialism. And while Modibo Keïta was a staunch supporter of the National Liberation Front in Algeria, fighting against French colonialism, the Senegalese elements within the Mali Federation disagreed with this position. In the words of Modibo Keïta,
"We thought that the people of Senegal will be able to get rid of Senghor, who, as everyone knows, is more French than the most French of Frenchmen."
He also stated,
Our federation could only survive if the political habits of the Senegalese political mass were transformed. The leaders spoke of independence but were incapable of conceiving of a Senegal independent of France. They claimed to be partisans of socialism but had no intention of undermining the interest of large colonial corporations.
L'indépendance de Mali, de Bamako, Africaine, croyable d'union, Modibo Keïta, Mouloudou qui la tient le vent, comme Thomas Sankara, comme Esson Keita Oblodi, comme Ibrahim Traoré.
Furthermore, micronationalism and competition between the Sudanese, as they were known at the time, and Senegalese politicians led to the split. When it came time to collectively vote for the president of the federation, Modibo Keïta appeared likely to win. Thus, on August 2nd, 1960, Léopold Senghor and his right-hand man Mamadou Dia flew to Paris. A couple weeks later, on August 19th, they announced on public radio that Senegal was splitting from the Mali Federation. While we still don't know precisely what happened during Senghor's time in Paris, we do know Charles de Gaulle's position on the Mali Federation. He once stated,
"The Republic of Sudan, I know it. The Republic of Senegal, I know it. The Mali Federation, I don't know it."
Alors, quand les colonisateurs ont senti cette ambition de fédérer toute l'Afrique de l'Ouest, sinon toute l'Afrique, ils ont travaillé certainement à toujours diviser en ciblant quelques leaders africains qui étaient beaucoup plus de sensibilité occidentale que africaine, au rang desquels, il n'y a pas de tabou, il faut citer les noms, Félix Houphouët-Boigny, qui avait déjà vraiment beaucoup d'alliances avec la France, a joué un rôle important pour affaiblir l'expérience de fédération qui allait voir le jour. Et du coup, il arrive à dissuader la Haute-Volta, devenue Burkina Faso aujourd'hui, le Niger et le Dahomey, n'est-ce pas, à ne pas adhérer à la fédération que Modibo Keïta voulait créer.
This would not be the last time that Modibo Keïta worked to create a Pan-African state. In 1961, Mali joined the Union of African States, formed by Kwame Nkrumah's Ghana and Ahmed Sékou Touré's Guinea. The Union's charter stated that the Union of African States rejected neocolonialism and worked to unify around domestic policy, foreign policy, defense, economy, and culture. And in 1962, the following clause was written into the Malian constitution.
The Republic of Mali may conclude association or community agreements with any African state, including the partial or total abandonment of sovereignty in order to achieve African unity.
This meant that Mali was willing to give up its total sovereignty as an independent state in order to join a union of African states to advance the cause of unification. Modibo Keïta maintained revolutionary geopolitical alignments throughout his time in power. The Malian military was sent on a special mission to Tanzania, where it trained the Mozambican Liberation Front forces for Frelimo and the African National Congress, ANC. Modibo Keïta also took an ardent stance against white minority rule in then Rhodesia, ending diplomatic relations with the United Kingdom after power was transferred to Ian Smith. Mali aided liberation struggles in Guinea-Bissau, Angola, and Mozambique. In 1962, Nelson Mandela and Oliver Tambo, two South African leaders of the African National Congress, ANC, came to Mali for support. Furthermore, Keïta was a staunch supporter of the National Liberation Front, FLN, in Algeria, which fought an armed struggle against French colonialism. He permitted the Algerian FLN to use large swaths of Mali from Kai to northern Mali as military bases and stations to intercept French military communications.
France throws the bulk of its military manpower into the Algerian rebellion, which daily assumes the proportions of total war. Flying columns fan out through the country, which on all sides has become a target for hit-and-run attacks by native guerrillas. And rounding up guerrillas has kept almost 400,000 of France's best troops pinned down.
Headquarters of the FLN were built in the Malian cities of Timbuktu, Kidal, and Gao. Keïta develops close relationships with Algerian freedom fighters, including the first president Ahmed Ben Bella. Martinican-born revolutionary Frantz Fanon, who fought in Algeria, stated,
"Mali decided on everything fervent and brutal, coherent and singularly sharp. extended the bridgehead and opened up precious perspectives.
And
Mali will not consider its mission accomplished as long as greedy colonialists occupy a single inch of African soil.
in 1963, a conflict over borders known as the Sand War broke out between neighbors Morocco and Algeria. Tunisian President Habib Bourguiba and Ethiopian Emperor Haile Selassie both attempted to mediate the dispute, but only Modibo Keïta was successful in bringing King Hassan II and Ahmed Ben Bella together for a ceasefire resolution. Keita also supported liberation movements outside of Africa. He positively connected with the Vietnamese liberation struggle, visiting Vietnam to support the war efforts and to meet with Ho Chi Minh. During his presidency, the women of Mali in particular organized a protest in solidarity with the freedom fighters of Vietnam. Keita's Mali was also friendly with Socialist China, leading to amicable visits between the two countries and various forms of economic and technical cooperation. Modibo Keïta persuaded his counterparts to adopt the term non-alignment during the 1961 conference in Belgrade. While the conference is now referred to as the first summit of the non-aligned movement, the popular term at the time was non-engaged. It was Modibo Keïta who proclaimed,
So here we are in Belgrade, at the historic conference of non-aligned countries, and I must confess that I prefer the expression non-aligned to non-engaged.
Le terme qui était le plus accepté et que la plupart voulaient qu'effectivement ça soit le cas, c'était le terme de non-engagé. Mais c'est quand il est intervenu que les gens ont compris qu'ils étaient dans l'erreur. Il a dit, nous ne sommes pas des non-engagés. Nous sommes engagés pour la cause de nos peuples. Nous sommes engagés pour la cause de la paix en Afrique et dans le monde. Donc, comme tel, nous ne devons pas utiliser le terme de non-engagé. Mais plutôt, je propose non-aligné. Et voilà pourquoi, dans un tonnerre d'applaudissements, le terme de non-aligné a été accepté. Ça, c'est Modibo, encore. Mais cela, très peu de gens le savent.
While Modibo Keïta's Mali has been labeled African socialism on some occasions and Marxist-Leninist on others, Keïta in actuality is probably best described as a scientific socialist who, much like Kwame Nkrumah and Ahmed Sékou Touré, adapted revolutionary theory to his local African context. Like Nkrumah and Sékou Touré, Keïta was adamant about adopting a form of socialism that could be compatible with his religious beliefs, in his case Islam.
وما اختلف فيه إلا الذين أوتوه من بعد ما جاءتهم البينات بغيا بينهم فهدى الله الذين آمنوا.
C'était vraiment une option plus juste, plus équitable, plutôt que le capitalisme pur et dur où je suis richissime, j'ai créé mes entreprises, j'ai généré de l'argent. Tant pis pour toi si tu ne manges pas 3 fois par jour, c'est pas mon problème. Je peux te regarder et te laisser mourir. Ce n'est pas conforme à notre culture. Notre culture, c'est une culture du partage, une culture de l'équilibre social. Et donc, c'est fort de tout ça que Modibo a fait le choix donc d'une gestion socialiste qui passait pour lui être la meilleure chose, le meilleur équilibre, la meilleure gestion équitable pour la majeure partie de la population.
He implemented economic planning leading to the establishment of copious state-owned enterprises. They included the Malian Canned Food Company, the Malian Oilseed Company, Refrigerated Slaughterhouse, Dugabugu Sugar Factory, the National Tobacco and Matches Company, the Malian Import and Export Company, the Malian Development Bank, the Malian Shipping Company, Magnambugu Brick Works, Granito and Marble Factory, Bamako Tapestry and Weaving Workshop, the Malian Cement Company, the National Company for Public Works, the Malian Agricultural Products Office, the Malian Bank of Credits and Deposits, Energy of Mali, Malian Publishing and Printing Company, the People's Bookshop of Mali, the National Cinema Office of Mali, the Niger Office, the People's Pharmacy of Mali, the Malian Radio Construction Company, the Malian Transport Company, the Malian Livestock Hides and Skin Company, the Malian Livestock and Meat Office, the Malian Hotel Company, the National Office of Tourism, Jikaroni Ceramic Factory, the National Mining Research and Exploitation Company, Niarela Wood Workshop, the Malian Textile Company, the Malian Equipment Company.
In addition to this, a hospital was built in each of Mali's 8 regions. The transportation sector was transformed through the Malian Road Transport Public Company, the Malian Railway Public Company, the Malian Navigation Company, Bamako Urban Transport, and the Air Mali Airlines.
Il a travaillé à créer des sociétés entreprises d'État plus d'une soixantaine des unités industrielles de transformation des produits locaux que nous produisons ici.
Malian socialism had a very rural characteristic because farmers made up the majority of Mali's productive forces. Beginning in 1958, rural life was reconstructed through the creation of village cooperatives.
Each village had a cooperative, and groups of village cooperatives were organized into local federations. Then, various districts of these village cooperatives were federated until they reached the level of regional cooperation and organization. While agricultural workers were allowed to keep their family farms, the government put most of the resources towards each village's collective cooperative farms. The profit generated at these rural collective farms was placed into a rural development fund. The Department of Rural Development distributed to the villages 29,556 plows, 1,082 wagons, 1,704 harrows, 2,932 hoes, 5,877 sprays, and 1,192 seeders.
While historically, Malian trade was dictated directly by France, with the private sector and other foreigners playing the role of middlemen, the Mali Import and Export Company allowed for farmers to engage collectively in direct international trade.
On top of this, local shops were created for each village cooperative, supplying farming equipment at fixed prices relative to the rural economy's buying power. The urban cities subsidized the prices of farming equipment for the rural villages.
Education was a crucial part of the Malian Revolution, and 1962 was a historic year for educational reform. The school system was transformed, and a greater emphasis was placed on promoting literacy and agriculture, especially in the rural majority of the country.
In 1960, the year that Mali gained independence, there were 54,540 students enrolled in 354 schools. By 1964, there were 113,448 students enrolled in 661 schools. In 1959, the year prior to Mali's independence, the government spent 8 million Malian francs on free school supplies for the public. Under Modibo Keïta, between 1963 and 1964, 360 million Malian francs went towards this end. In 1959, the colonial government provided students with 300,000 notebooks and 15,000 textbooks. Under Modibo Keïta, between 1963 and 1964, the government would provide Malian students with 2 million notebooks and 331,000 textbooks. The school system in Mali had a Young Pioneer program to train youth for revolutionary political leadership within the ranks of the USRDA. Civic and ideological education was added to the school curriculum to teach young people about scientific socialism. African history and literature were taught in school as well as current events of the time.
Parlons de cas de l'école. Avec la réforme de 1962, je suis un pur produit de la réforme de 1962 que les Modibo ont institué pour changer complètement l'école classique héritée de la colonisation en lui donnant un contenu en prise sur notre histoire véritable. Sinon, avant les Modibo, on n'enseignait pas l'histoire du Mali dans les écoles. Pas du tout, ni la géographie ni l'histoire. C'est lui qui a introduit.
Young people learned about the national liberation struggles of the FLN of Algeria, Frelimo of Mozambique, the MPLA of Angola, and the PAIGC of Guinea-Bissau and Cape Verde as a part of their curriculum. Students also learned about the struggle against white minority rule in South Africa and Zimbabwe, and the Black freedom struggle waged in the United States. Technical colleges were set up to teach students how to operate machinery and various new technologies. The goal was to train students both ideologically and in technical skills for the industrialization of Mali. In addition to this, cadre training schools were built to further political education. In the words of Modibo Keïta,
the USRDA created these schools to better equip political leaders in the ongoing battle to socialize the Malian economy. The aim is to take measures to strengthen the hold of the state and workers in all sectors, for the benefit of all sections of the population. It's about having the necessary elements for the scientific analysis of global problems.
The National Youth Week was instituted as a popular cultural event in Bamako, hosted every year. Delegates from every region of Mali came to Bamako to represent the culture of their regions and villages. The week promoted sports, art, and folk culture and has had a lasting impact on Mali's national identity. Some of Mali's most iconic artists got their start during National Youth Week, including Salif Keita and Ali Farka Touré. The position of women in Malian society was also transformed during this period. Every committee of the USRDA was required to have women participate. The reform of the Civil Code gave women in Mali more rights, including the right to choose their husbands. The Pan-African Women's Organization was founded in Bamako in 1962. One of its most prominent founders was socialist feminist Awa Keita of Mali, who was the head of organizing women in the US RDA. The organization was headquartered in Mali until the end of Keita's government in 1968. A Women's Social Commission was also formed in 1963 to support women's cultural and educational activities.
Les femmes, il a dit les sœurs, les épouses, n'est-ce pas? Les grand-mères et autres, adorez-les sans les mettre à la place de Dieu. Aimez-les et surtout, soyez solidaires dans toutes les circonstances.
Keita also received a Lenin Peace Prize from the USSR in 1963. He used the money to create an educational center for disabled youth with polio. Keita proclaimed,
"A Republic of Mali free from all commitments and political ties to France."
On 20 January 1961, in response to grassroots organizing on the part of the youth wing of the local RDA and the labor unions, Modibo Keïta expelled the French troops from Mali. From this day forward, Mali would be one of 3 former French colonies that had a totally independent military run without foreign assistance. The others were Guinea-Conakry and Algeria. The expulsion of the French troops and the closure of the French military base was the first step in Mali's abandonment of the French community agreements.
L'armée française qui s'était complètement implantée, qui s'était créée des bases un peu partout au Mali, a été sommée de libérer l'intégralité des bases qu'ils occupent au Mali et nous donner la chance de créer notre armée nationale parce que la souveraineté passe par ça.
Following in the footsteps of Ahmed Sékou Touré, who rejected the neo-colonial CFA franc currency that granted France direct access to African reserves and enormous economic power in its former colonies, Modibo Keïta turned away from the CFA in 1962. Keïta ushered in the new Malian franc, a sovereign currency with no ties to France. However, the success of the independent Malian franc was short-lived.
Comment donner des chances de convertibilité à l'international pour une monnaie, sinon ça reste que du papier. Si on n'arrive pas à avoir ça. Et ça, c'est des aspects qu'en présent, nous ne maîtrisons pas totalement. La garantie est déposée à la Banque de France. Il l'a tenté par orgueil de nationalisme, il a créé sa propre monnaie, elle a fonctionné pendant un moment. Mais nous avons aussi des milieux d'affaires chez nous, des opérateurs économiques, qui avaient tous les problèmes du monde en se déplaçant à l'international pour acheter telle ou telle chose pour venir dans leur pays. Si tu as une monnaie qui n'est pas convertible à l'international, tu as des problèmes. Donc ça a créé une sorte de grogne, de bruit dans le milieu des affaires, dans le milieu des commerçants, qui se sont rebellés un peu contre le régime. C'est pourquoi j'ai dit qu'il n'y a pas un régime qui fait l'unanimité, que tout le monde aime. Ça n'existe pas. Nulle part au monde.
1967 marked a particularly tumultuous year for the socialist revolution in Mali. Up until August of that year, the government was controlled by the National Political Bureau, which was rife with internal rivalries between the left wing and the right wing of the US RDA party.
However, Keita dissolved the National Political Bureau that year and created the National Committee for the Defense of the Revolution. Its goals were to mobilize the masses further, to strengthen the people's capacity for resistance, to liquidate non-socialist tendencies, to strengthen weaknesses, to reinforce party structures and democratic organizations, and to politically and ideologically educate the masses. A large part of Modibo Keïta's motivation was to defend and protect the socialist revolution in light of the recent CIA-backed coup d'etat overthrowing his close comrade in Ghana, Kwame Nkrumah.
Another error of the Keita era was the well-intentioned but poorly executed People's Militias. The mission of the People's Militias was,
in normal times, to stand guard over our national roads and crossroads, to detect, catalogue, and monitor our high bush and mountain tracks, our ponds, our pastures, our caves, caverns, wells, bridges, dams, ports, airfields, and all works and installations of strategic interest.
In practice, the relationship between the People's Militia and regular civilians grew contentious, as some reported abuses of power in towns and the countryside. During Modibo Keïta's presidency, certain honest party members were wrongfully arrested on corruption charges, including Thora Keita, whose name was cleared through an investigation.
After this error, Modibo Keïta refused to implement preventative arrests and believed only in punishing those whose guilt was proven through solid evidence. According to his close comrade, Amadou Sédou Traoré, this incident rendered Keïta inactive when he was presented with the list of 14 coup plotters 3 months before his overthrow.
While Keita was in the Malian city of Mopti for a conference, soldiers organized a coup in Bamako. Due to Modibo Keïta's widespread popularity among the Malian people, the military was at first interested in maintaining Modibo Keïta in power, if they could get rid of the USRDA party. Upon his arrival in Bamako, the soldiers asked Modibo Keïta to renounce socialism. He responded,
"No way. Here in Mali, we are a country of law and democracy. Since independence, we have respected the will of the people. It was the people who opted for socialism at the Extraordinary Congress of 22nd September 1960. So, socialism is not my choice alone. Ask the people what they think. As for my collaborators, until further notice, I have confidence in them."
They asked him to resign from office. Upon his refusal, he was arrested and detained. Despite Modibo Keïta's best efforts to protect and prolong the revolution, he was deposed by the military led by Moussa Traoré on 19 November 1968. From 16 to 20 March 1968 of that same year, French head of covert operations in Africa, Jacques Foccart, visited Mali. Foccart was the head of a secret network responsible for a number of coups d'états, rigged elections, and political assassinations throughout Africa. 8 of the 14 putschists who overthrew Modibo Keïta received military training in the United States. Moussa Traoré would go on to serve as the president of Mali from 1968 to 1991, and in 1984 he reinstated the French-controlled CFA franc.
Étaient commis à une tâche qu'ils ont malheureusement exécutée et que certains d'entre eux ont regretté après le coup d'État. Notamment le président Moussa Traoré lui-même, en plusieurs occasions, a eu à dire qu'il a regretté d'avoir participé au coup d'État contre Modibo. D'ailleurs aussi, il faut préciser que c'est Modibo qui a offert une bourse à cet homme-là pour qu'il aille faire architecture en Union soviétique. Et donc c'est quelqu'un qui était pas seulement proche de Modibo, mais qui était aussi Modibo.
Parmi lesquels, même le général Moussa Traoré, qui va être le tombeur de Modibo Keïta, avait été déjà formé à l'école française.
Moi, j'ai vu le coup d'État de 68 fait. J'étais à Moscou, l'ambassadeur français téléphonait au conseiller de l'ambassadeur malien là-bas. J'étais là. Il dit, aujourd'hui, nous avons terrassé votre géant au pied d'argile, Modibo Keïta, qui nous a tant et tant fait souffrir. Nous avons conditionné des jeunes officiers maliens pour l'abattre. On a demandé avec qui? Et avec la complicité active de Oufuette-Boigny. Voilà ce que l'ambassadeur a dit. Français, en 68.
Modibo Keïta died in a military camp in 1977 after being transferred from one prison to another throughout Mali. The Radio Mali announcement that communicated his death to the public referred to him as
Modibo Keïta, a retired teacher, has died of acute pulmonary edema.
He left behind multiple prison letters that show that even in the face of brutal conditions, he maintained deep gratitude for his loved ones and faith in humanity. Today, he is remembered by a new generation in Mali that draws inspiration from his Pan-African ideals and revolutionary approach to national sovereignty and self-determination.
Mais l'impact, c'est peut-être aujourd'hui. C'est des militaires maliens qui sont arrivés aux affaires, ils ont estimé que la gouvernance n'était pas à leur convenance, ils ont changé, ils sont venus aux commandes, ils sont en train de diriger leur propre pays. On ne demande pas mieux.
Et c'est pourquoi j'ai la conviction que l'AES, là, ça ne pourra pas échouer. Sinon, ils ont une très bonne volonté. Ils sont en train de vouloir bien faire les choses. En disant qu'ils font ils sont en train de faire un très bon travail sur le plan de la sécurité et mieux compris qu'il faut qu'on crée l'AES. En mutualisant nos efforts, parce que nous vivons les mêmes problèmes, on peut aller loin.
Mais ces jeunes colonels qui sont là, c'est encore l'école de Sankara, ça. Avec le jeune Traoré, là, je vous assure, l'appui de Keïta, ça ne fera jamais défaut. Quand le Burkina est avec nous, Dieu merci. Mais prenez un exemple, la présidente. Ils ont déménagé au Niger.
Donc, je suis prêt dans le cadre de l'AES à aller montrer l'histoire. Les gens pensent que c'est un hasard que les pays de l'AES se sont retrouvés. Ce n'est pas vrai. C'est dans notre chaîne. Les grands empires qui ont existé englobaient tous ces trois pays-là. Et même d'autres.
Modibo la kahina la malenya o kumana dans les mourir entiers de peur de indépendance Sario Sumusirani toye Sumusirani toye Sumusirani toye Modibo Keïta à partir de là, on devait